So fellas, out of all 8 current UFC champions, only 3 of them have title fights booked. One of them is quite controversial, so I'm going to be going through every UFC weight class and trying to fix the title picture in every UFC weight class to make sure that the title fights are good, they all make sense, and we aren't getting these terrible undeserved title shots. And we'll start off with the Flyweight division. Now, obviously, Pantoja's just beat Kai Sakura in the most recent pay-per-view, but there's quite a lot of controversy over who he fights next because he has pretty much done a good job of clearing out the Flyweight division to the point where there's not really any name left in the Flyweight division for him to beat. Demetrius Johnson's a fight that's getting talked about a lot, but the way that Demetrius Johnson's been responding, it looks like that fight isn't happening. Muhammad Mokaev keeps getting brought up, but that fight would sell barely any pay-per-views. Mokaev's been cut from the UFC, and even if he came back to the UFC, he still hasn't beaten anyone in the top 5, so I don't think Mokaev could be an option. I think the fight that we should do for Pantoja in the Flyweight division would be Pantoja versus the winner of Brandon Royval versus Kara France. I think the UFC should book a rematch right now between Royval and Kara France. Obviously, Kara France gets the home advantage. It makes sense to be at UFC 312 in Perth. But I think this would be a really good fight, not only from how good the fight would be. I mean, you've got a powerful striker coming off a knockout win in Kara France versus an elusive striker in Brandon Royval, who's also got pretty decent grappling. We've seen the fight before. I think it needs a rematch, especially with the stages that they're at in their current career, as they're both in the top 5. They're both coming off wins. They're both about a fight away from a title shot. I mean, you look at Royval. He beat Brandon Moreno early this year. It was a close fight. It was quite controversial, I guess, but the fact that he went out there and beat Moreno on short notice as well was impressive for Royval to do against a guy that has beaten him before. And then he goes out there and beats Tatsuro Taira, takes the O away from Tatsuro Taira, first guy to beat him in an absolute scrap. Looked really good in that fight, so Royval's riding a 2-fight winning streak since losing to Pantoja. And then you've got Kara France, who, yes, he lost to Amir Albazi, but it was one of the most controversial losses of 2023. And then in his most recent fight, knocked out Steve Erceg at UFC, what was it, UFC 306 or 305? Knocked him out at UFC 305. The same Steve Erceg that went life and death with Pantoja and made Pantoja take him to a controversial decision. So you've got those two guys. I think if Royval can get Kara France on that 3-fight winning streak as well, I don't mind Royval getting another title shot. And for Kara France, if he can beat Royval, who's on a 2-fight winning streak, ranked number 1 in the division, I think we give Kara France the title shot. So for Pantoja, give him the winner of Royval and Kara France. Now, if Pantoja does win this against the winner, which he probably will, let's be honest, I think there's no one else in the Flyweight division. I can't possibly think of any big surging name right now in the Flyweight division for him to fight. If he was to fight the winner of Royval and Kara France, I think going up to Bantamweight is the move. He's cleared out the Flyweight division. He's got a couple of defenses. I think Bantamweight will be the next move. Now, obviously, we've got Merab taking on Umar Nurmagomedov at UFC 311, which obviously should be for the belt, rightfully so. I think Pantoja should fight the winner. The winner of Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov. I think we give Pantoja a shot and let him fight the winner. It's not even like it's holding up the Bantamweight division. Apart from Umar Nurmagomedov, there isn't like a surging number 1 contender in that division. I think Pantoja moving up a weight class to get double champ status. He's probably the most deserving champion to move up a weight class out of every champion in the UFC right now. If it's him versus Merab, you've got the guy who cleared out Flyweight versus the guy who cleared out Bantamweight. If it's him versus Umar, you've got the unstoppable Pantoja versus the unstoppable Umar Nurmagomedov. I think stylistically they'd be really fun fights. On paper, it makes a lot of sense, and it also gives time for the Flyweight division to move on while Pantoja's up in the Bantamweight division. And assuming that he does move back down to the Flyweight division, like we said, there isn't any surging names right now, so we're gonna have to book another fight that Pantoja can have when he comes back down to Flyweight. So I think we do. Well, if Pantoja's moving up to the Bantamweight division and then moving back down, I think we do Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. I think this should be the fight that takes place while Pantoja's up at Bantamweight, so that when it comes down, he's got someone to fight. Because Brandon Moreno, he's lost his 2 fights previous to his most recent win. Obviously, he lost to Pantoja and he lost to Royval. But to be fair to Moreno, they were 2 very close fights. It could have gone either way on the judges' scorecard. And in his most recent fight, picked up a win over Amir Albazi recently in a fight night where he absolutely battered Amir Albazi. Looked like it was vintage Brandon Moreno. I don't think he's earned a title shot immediately from that. I think he should go through Tatsuro Taira, who's beaten Alex Perez in an impressive win, and he did lose to Brandon Royval in his most recent fight, but again, it was a super close fight, and it was his biggest step up he's had of his career so far. So I think we do Moreno versus Taira when he gets a title shot when Pantoja comes back down. And if Taira's not an option, this is the fight we give Mokaev. This is the fight we give Mokaev. Like we said, Mokaev hasn't beaten anyone in the top 5 with him. We're going to bring Mokaev back to the UFC. I think Brandon Moreno's the fight for him. Same reason why, when he can get a title shot. If Mokaev beats Moreno, give him a title shot. If Moreno can shut down Mokaev, give him a title shot too. So that's what I think we should do for the Flyweight division and Pantoja, which is quite a tricky division considering he's cleared it out. And then for the Bantamweight division with Umar Nurmagomedov, obviously going to be taking on Merab. No, he's going to be taking on Umar at UFC 311 is Merab in a title fight that obviously should take place. And obviously Pantoja, like I just said, should fight the winner in my opinion. But after that, like I said, there's not really a surging name in the bantamweight division. You've got Peter Yan, who's already been mauled by Merab, has lost to Sean O'Malley, lost to Sterling, so he's lost a lot of these title fights or these contender fights. Now, he is coming off a winning streak, beating Song Yadong and a really good one over Davis and Figueiredo recently. You've also got Sean O'Malley, who obviously former champion, knocked out Sterling, battered Marlon Vera, had a pretty decent title run, but lost his most recent fight to Merab, and he hasn't pulled off a single win since then. So if we look at the current state of the bantamweight division, I think the fight we should do, if Pantoja is going to be fighting the winner of Merab and Umar, I think we do Peter Yan versus Sean O'Malley too. I think this fight makes a lot of sense. It makes all the sense in the world right now. I know I've been calling for the fight between O'Malley and Sandhagen, but if we're talking about the title picture, Yan versus O'Malley makes sense in my opinion. We've seen this fight before. It was one of the best fights of 2022 when it took place. It was an amazing back and forth fight, and there was some controversy in it as well. Sean O'Malley got the win. A lot of people thought Peter Yan had done enough to win. Let's run it back, get rid of the controversy, maybe for a 5-rounder in like a co-main event of a pay-per-view. Peter Yan versus Sean O'Malley, the rematch that takes place, and the winner can get a title shot in their next fight. And then for the bantamweight division, I think we do Figueiredo versus Corey Sandhagen. They're both coming off losses in, I guess, #1 contender fights. Figueiredo losing to Yan, Sandhagen losing to Uman Magomedov. And I think this would just be a really good fight between Sandhagen, who's got good grappling, amazing striking. You've got Davis and Figueiredo, who's got good striking, amazing grappling. This would be such a technical fight between, in my opinion, two of not only the most well-rounded dudes in the division, but just two technicians who are normally in fun fights. Sandhagen versus Figueiredo, former champion Figueiredo versus one of the best in the business in Sandhagen. But maybe not a #1 contender fight, but at least a fight to put them both back in the title picture. I think this would be amazing. Then for the featherweight division, now Topuria has recently come out and said that he wants to move to the lightweight division, and I was planning on obviously doing a title run for Topuria, but if he is going to move on to the lightweight division, that leaves the featherweight belt vacant. And I think for the featherweight belt, the fight that should be made, if Topuria is moving up, is Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. I think Volkanovski should get his title shot. I know before I was saying that Volkanovski should fight maybe Movsar Evloev if he's going to get back in there with Topuria, but if Topuria's gone, I think we give Volk his immediate rematch, which he's earned. I mean, he's got 5 title defenses, and yes, he got knocked out by Elite Topuria, but if Topuria's moving to a division, he ain't a problem no more. Volkanovski versus Lopez, give them both their shot. I think Lopez has earned his shot as well. 3 ranked wins, just recently beat Brian Ortega, nearly finished him in the first, in a really impressive win at UFC 306. So, Volk versus Lopez, Volk's chance of getting the featherweight title shot. Lopez finally getting his title shot that he's wanted. A chance for Volkanovski to get back in the winning column. A chance for Lopez to beat a former champion and become a champion in the same night. And then I think we do Movsar Evloev versus the winner of Volkanovski and Lopez. I don't mind Evloev getting a title shot at this moment in time. 19-0, 4 ranked wins in the division, including a win over Diego Lopez, who, in my opinion, should be getting a title shot in his next fight regardless. So, we do Evloev versus the winner of Volkanovski and Lopez. And considering that Topuria's moving up, I think this should be the plan that the UFC do for the featherweight division. And then for the lightweight division with Makhachev, obviously he's got a fight booked against Sarukian at UFC 311. I think I really like that fight. I do think Makhachev pulls through, but regardless, that fight is rightfully so taking place at 311. But then, who does the winner fight? Well, we just talked about Topuria moving up to the lightweight division, but in my opinion, he shouldn't get an immediate title shot against the winner because he hasn't really earned it. He's not going to be moving up with the belt. It's not like he's moving up as a double champ. He's going to be vacating his belt. I think he should fight a contender in the lightweight division to earn his title shot and get in the queue of the lightweight division. I know he's done great things in the featherweight division, but this is a new division. I don't think he immediately earns a title shot. So I think we do Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. I think this has potential to be one of the best fights that the UFC make in modern history. This would be amazing. You've got Oliveira, who's near enough cleared out nearly every top lightweight contender you can possibly put him against, apart from Sarukian and Makhachev, the 2 guys competing for the belt. And Topuria's expressed a lot of interest in the fight with Charles Oliveira, saying he wants to vacate the belt and go up and beat Oliveira. It seems like Topuria's on board with this idea. Oliveira, I'd say, is about 1 fight away from a title fight too. I would have said he deserved a title shot, but rather than have him waiting, put him against Topuria. Topuria versus Oliveira. You've got the power. One of the hardest hitters in the 155 division in Charles Oliveira versus one of the hardest hitters in 145. And a great boxer in Elite Topuria. You've got the jiu-jitsu and the grappling of Charles Oliveira versus the jiu-jitsu and grappling of Topuria. A lot of people forget that Topuria came from a grappling background predominantly. So Topuria versus Oliveira, one of the best fights you can make in the UFC, regardless of whether it's for a belt or not. I think that should be a sick #1 contender fight. And then if you want to add another contender fight in the mix, Dan Hooker versus Justin Gaethje. Dan Hooker plus Justin Gaethje is the epitome of violence. This will be one of the most violent fights you can possibly make in the UFC. Dan Hooker, he had a fight of the year in 2023 against Jalin Turner. He had a fight of the year this year when he beat Gamrot. He's had one of the greatest fights in UFC history when he beat Dustin Poirier. He's ranked #6 in the division. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. Give him a contender fight. You've got Justin Gaethje, who is in a fight of the year contender. in every single one of his fights. He's ranked in the top 3. He is coming off a loss to Max Holloway, but before that he was riding on a 2-fight winning streak, so I think they should put him against each other. One of the most violent fights you can make, maybe for like a real, I was going to say fight night, but I think they're both past fight nights now, so sticking on like a pay-per-view, but I want this to be 5 rounds, maybe for like a pay-per-view co-main event, Dan Hooker versus Justin Gaethje 5-rounder, and if Dan Hooker beats Gaethje, at this point in time, he's going to be top 3 ranked, coming off a 4-fight winning streak, and Gaethje, if he beats Hooker, he would have won 3 of his last 4, and he would be ranked in the top 3 of the division coming off a win. So I think we can kind of market this as a contender fight as well, and it would be an amazing fight at that. So the lightweight division has options to make these great fights. Hooker Gaethje, Topuria Oliveira as some contender fights. And then for the welterweight division, now obviously we've got, well, we should have Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat fighting for the belt next. I think Shavkat's earned his shot. I know there's a few people saying that if Buckley can get past Covington, then he can jump the queue and fight Belal Muhammad, but in my opinion, Shavkat's done enough. 19-0, every single one of his wins come by way of finish, apart from a close fight with Gary, which you've got to give him credit. He beat Ian Gary. Fair enough, he might have been a little bit overhyped going into it, but he took the O away from Ian Gary. I think he's earned his title fight with Belal Muhammad. He was supposed to fight for the belt anyway, so he didn't really have to fight Ian Gary. He just did that to get another win on his name. So Muhammad Rakhmonov should be next. And then at that point, there's just a lot of contenders in this division. Like I said, you've got the winner of Covington and Buckley. You've got Jack Della Maddalena. You've got Sean Brady. You've even got the likes of Leon, Usman, and Gary still in the mix of the title picture of the welterweight division. So I think what we should do is Jack Della Maddalena versus Kamaru Usman as a #1 contender fight. Winner gets a title shot between JDM and Usman. This should take place in Perth at UFC 312 in my opinion for JDM's, so JDM can fight in his hometown. It's not going to be against Leon either, because Leon's apparently headlining his own show at UFC London, so I don't think we can do JDM versus Leon, meaning we can't really do JDM versus Sean Brady, because then the only opponent for Usman would be Leon, but we can't have that. We've seen that too many times already, so I think we do Usman versus JDM at Perth, Leon versus Sean Brady. But yeah, Usman versus JDM. This should be a great fight stylistically. The comeback of Usman versus JDM, who's looked unstoppable. Like I said, Jack Della Maddalena, undefeated in the UFC, riding a big winning streak, knocked out Gilbert Burns in his last fight, and that was when Gilbert Burns was like a highly ranked opponent too. Kamaru Usman, one of the greatest welterweights of all time, obviously former champion, has taken 2 losses in a row in the welterweight division to Leon, but I don't think that should stop him from getting a title shot, at least a contender fight against Jack Della Maddalena. So Maddalena versus Usman, #1 contender fight in Perth, the winner gets a title shot. And then for UFC London Fight Night, if Leon Edwards is going to fight anyone, I feel like the only name that he can really fight is Sean Brady. I think he's too quick of a turnaround for Ian Gary, Buckley, and obviously he's already fought Covington. So I think we do him versus Sean Brady for a #1, maybe not a #1 contender fight, but at least for a contender fight for them to both get into the title picture. And then we do Ian Gary versus the winner of Colby and Buckley. Ian Gary did just lose his contender fight to Shavkat, but I think his stock is rose in that fight. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, everyone thought that was a very close fight. Gary did better than most people expected. And obviously the winner of Covington and Buckley are going to want a big fight that can earn them a title shot. And I feel like this is the perfect way, because if it's Gary versus Colby, that's a rivalry that we've been waiting for ages. That as a #1 contender fight would bang. And if Buckley versus Gary happens, it's been scheduled before. Buckley, if he can get past Colby, he's going to be a surging welterweight. So Gary versus the winner, I don't mind that happening. Then for the middleweight division, obviously, we've got Dricus versus Strickland taking place at UFC 312 in Sydney, but Chimaev should have been the guy. Most people would have liked to see Chimaev get his title shot, but we've got the title fight anyway. Dricus versus Strickland, it's happening, whatever. But Chimaev should definitely get a title shot regardless in his next fight after what he did to Robert Whittaker. I think the UFC should go to Abu Dhabi in July. I know they usually go in October, but I think July, August time is when they should go to Abu Dhabi. I think they should go earlier on, because we can't have Chimaev fighting on average once a year. If you look at his record, Chimaev on average is fighting once a year, usually in October. We can't have him fighting three times in 3 years, all in October. I want him to come back sooner than just October of 2025, and I want him to get a title shot against the winner of Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland, which in my opinion, he would beat both of them, which is why I think he earned the title shot, but it is what it is. Let him fight the winner, let him fight him about July, August, around that time. And then for the rest of the division, I mean, we've got a few contenders in the top 5. We've got Imavov, we've got Caio Bravo, Adesanya still in the mix. I think for a maybe not a #1 contender fight, but for a top contender fight, we do Imavov versus Israel Adesanya. This is a fight that apparently is going to be taking place at UFC Saudi Arabia in February for a fight night. I never thought we'd see Izzy in a fight night, but here we are against Imavov. I think this is a big fight for Imavov. You know, he's been on I want to say a tear in the middleweight division. I know he lost to Sean Strickland that kind of messed that winning streak up, but he's on a 3-fight winning streak. Beating Adesanya on top of that would be a huge win for Imavov that, in my opinion, could earn him a title shot. And for Izzy, Obviously, former middleweight champion, one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Now, he has lost most of his recent fights, but if he can beat an up-and-coming contender in Imavov, that'll be big for Izzy too. So, Imavov versus Izzy, maybe a #1 contender fight for Imavov if he can get past Adesanya, but just a fight that I think makes sense. Let Adesanya fight an up-and-comer. Let Imavov get a big fight against Adesanya, especially after he recently beat Brandon Allen. So, Imavov versus Izzy. And then we do Caio Borralho versus the loser of Strickland and Dricus du Plessis. And I think if Borralho can win, he could get a title shot from this. Now, I don't think, let's say Strickland loses to Dricus and then beats Borralho. I don't think we give Strickland an immediate title shot. But I think if Borralho can beat the loser, that would have been enough to earn him a title shot. He's been on a tear in the UFC, one of the biggest winning streaks in the UFC right now. He's top 6 in the division. And if he can beat a former champion against Strickland or Dricus du Plessis, that's going to be a massive win for Caio Borralho. And I think he would have earned a title shot in the middleweight division against whoever the champion is. So that's what I think we should do at middleweight. Then for the light heavyweight division, for Alex Pereira, there's only one fight, and it is him versus Magomed Ankalaev. I know he's had aspirations of moving to the heavyweight division, but in my opinion, he has to get past Ankalaev before he moves to heavyweight. If he can get past Ankalaev, I'm happy with him moving to the heavyweight division, which I'll talk about when we get onto the heavyweight division. But yeah, it's got to be Ankalaev next. 20-1 as a record, only 1 loss. He's beaten more ranked fighters right now than Alex Pereira has. He's definitely earned his title shot. He should have beaten Jan Blachowicz as well, in my opinion. So Alex Pereira versus Ankalaev. Most fans want to see it. I don't know why this hasn't been scheduled yet. It should have been scheduled before the Khalil Roundtree fight. Instead of Roundtree, it should have been Ankalaev, but now's the time to make it. Sometime next year, early first half of 2025. Porton, Ankalaev, let's get it done. And then we've recently had the announcement of Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill taking each other on at UFC 311. I hope to God this is not a #1 contender fight. Even if Alex Pereira does move to the heavyweight division, he gets past Ankalaev, this still shouldn't be for a #1 contender fight, in my opinion, because, I mean, what are you selling? Yuri's been knocked out by Porton twice now, brutally in the rematch as well. Jamal Hill's most recent fight and the most memorable fight is him getting put to sleep by Porton too. These are essentially the victims of Porton going at it. They can't just get an immediate title shot from winning against each other. I think they should have to go further than that. We've also had a big announcement between Jan Blachowicz and Carlos Ulberg at UFC London, which is a banger, by the way. So I think the UFC could do a bit of a tournament format. If Alex Pereira moves to the heavyweight division, the winner of Yuri and Hill versus the winner of Jan Blachowicz and Carlos Ulberg takes each other on for the interim light heavyweight belt if Alex Pereira does move to the heavyweight division. And if Ankalaev can beat Alex Pereira, then we do the winner of this kind of 4-man tournament against Ankalaev for the belt. I think that should be taking place for, or like I said, for the interim light heavyweight belt. And if Porton decides that he's done with the light heavyweight division, he just wants to permanently move up to heavyweight, then we just simply do it for the undisputed belt. Not for the interim belt, for the undisputed belt. The winner of Yuri and Hill versus the winner of Blachowicz and Ulberg for the undisputed light heavyweight belt if Porton's not around anymore. That's what I think we should do at light heavyweight. And then for the heavyweight division, there's only one fight to make. It's John Jones versus the interim champion Tom Aspinall. I'm not going to go over it now, but there's genuinely no other fight in the heavyweight division that makes a lot of sense. If John Jones doesn't fight Tom Aspinall, he's going to have to vacate his belt. That's obviously the fight that should happen. And like I said, Porton, he's got aspirations of fighting the winner of John Jones and Tom Aspinall. He said it a few times already. So I think, obviously, Porton against Jones would be a super fight. Porton versus Tom Aspinall would be a super fight. And even if Ankalaev beats Alex Pereira, this might sound kind of crazy. I might be stretching it a little bit. But I don't even mind Porton moving up to the heavyweight division, even if he isn't a champion, and getting a title shot. Just because of the body of work that he's putting in the UFC and the light heavyweight division. And let's be honest, he's probably more, well, he's definitely more interesting, with all due respect, than any of the other heavyweight contenders that we've got going on right now. So I think Alex Pereira, whether he's got the belt or doesn't have the belt, against the winner of John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, who have both expressed interest back into Tom Aspinall, I think would be a big fight. Now, who does the winner fight? Who does the winner fight if, you know, between Porton and Jones and Aspinall? Well, obviously, if John Jones beats the both of them, I don't think he's going to take on another heavyweight contender. I think if he does beat John Jones and Tom Aspinall, if he does beat Alex Pereira and Tom Aspinall, I think he's going to be done. And at that point, they'll probably just do Tom Aspinall for the vacant belt against somebody else. But I was always going to say that we should do Gon versus Volkov, or the winner of Gon and Volkov against Jailton Almeida for a #1 contender fight. But obviously we had that really controversial decision where Cyril Gon won the fight, but he shouldn't have won the fight. So I think we do Alexander Volkov versus Jailton Almeida for a #1 contender fight in the heavyweight division. The winner can fight the winner of, well, it's kind of a confusing thing to say. The winner of Jones and Aspinall fights Alex Pereira, and whoever wins that faces the winner of Almeida and Volkov, in my opinion. I think this makes sense. Volkov, he was riding a 4-fight winning streak, and in my opinion, he beat Cyril Gon, but it does count as a loss. So I think we'll just stick him immediately back into a #1 contender fight with Jailton Almeida, who has earned it. I mean, he came into the UFC surging on a bunch of finishes, has a boring fight with Derek Lewis, loses to Blades, but he's finished Romanov. He's about to beat Spivak. I think he's got one more fight away from a title shot against, like I said, Alexander Volkov. This should be the fight between two heavyweight contenders to determine who fights for the heavyweight belt next after this whole Jones and Alex Pereira thing is done with Tom Aspinall. I think that should happen next. Like I said, Jones is going to be taking, or Alex Pereira taking on Jones and Tom Aspinall. What do we do with the rest of the division? Well, I think we do Cyril Gane versus Curtis Blades. I think this is what Cyril Gane deserves. I don't think we give him a title shot immediately against Tom Aspinall. I think we give him and test him against a stylistic problem. Yes, he's on a 2-fight winning streak to Volkov and Spivak. Fair enough beating Spivak, but the Volkov win was very controversial. I don't think it earns him a title shot. Curtis Blades is in the top 5. These guys haven't fought yet. To be fair, Gane hasn't really fought much contenders. He hasn't fought Sergey Pavlovich. He hasn't fought Curtis Blades. He's only really fought for a belt, Volkov, and a couple of these fat heavyweights up and coming. So I think we test him against Curtis Blades. And if he can beat Curtis Blades in dominant fashion, in my opinion, get Cyril Gane back in the title picture. But that, in my opinion, is how you fix the title picture in every UFC weight class. Making fights that make sense, fun fights. A lot of contender fights. So let me know your thoughts on these matchups. Do you agree that they make sense? Would you change anything about, make any different fights? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.